sometimes when you are given work to ink from a penciler, you might see something that looks like this. These small X's that are present on the drawing, and you might be thinking, well, what do these X's actually mean? Well, that's the penciler telling you where he or she wants to have black fills. So as you ink, you want to keep in mind that the areas that are denoted with the X's are going to be solid black. And from that point on, you can then indicate the solid blacks, create the outlines, and then add whatever textures you're going to need. So typically, and I'll do this assignment here just kind of for fun, for giggles. I'll ink this one and I'll show you what I'm talking about. And where do you start inking? It really depends upon what you feel like looking at first. I generally start off with the characters. So I'm going to start off with just first putting in the outline. And again, different pencilers have different approaches when they're inking. Like me, I tend to pencil very loose because generally speaking, I'm the only one who's going to be inking my pencils. But if I were to give my work to someone else to ink, as is often the case when you're dealing with something that is done in the comic book industry, for example, you typically want to give the inker as much information as possible to make it easier for him or her to be able to know how to properly transcribe your pencil. So here's my rocks. I'll kind of keep this quick. And I'm making these rocks a little bit more organic. Holding down the space bar to kind of move through the composition. That's another nice keyboard shortcut. If you're zoomed inside and you want to move around your composition, pressing and holding the space bar down allows you to easily do that. So here's another rock. And so I've got all of the elements basically inked in. I'll clean it up with my lasso tool. I find the lasso tool is much easier to work with than the eraser tool, and I think I've talked about that in previous videos. Just gives you a crisper line compared to some of the eraser tools that are out there. And now what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and indicate I've got this line here, and part of it is also having some knowledge of what you're actually creating here. So I'll just create these lines. These lines are going to serve as the basis for where my black fills are going to exist. All right. So now I can hide my pencil layer. And I know that, for example, these areas right here where the hat and the hair and the sleeves are going to be filled in with black. So let me hide my pencil layer, use my paint bucket tool. I'll make a brand new layer just in case I need to go back and restart over again. And I'll fill that in. And one thing you'll notice is that just right away, I forgot to close a gap here, right away it just makes this image pop, right? It really kind of makes the contrast much more evident. I'll pull this stuff over here like so. Oh, didn't close a gap somewhere. Let's see. Sometimes it's not super obvious. Let me zoom in and see. Oh, there we go. See, that's a gap. And then of course I want to add some texture to the rock. maybe I'll just kind of come back in by adding some hatching or some lines, just so that we get a sense of grayscale, right? Remember, it's not going to just go from stark white to stark black unless it's something that is very film noirish, right? It's going to have a little bit of light values. And when you're also adding your black fills, you still want to make sure that the objects are readable. In other words, if I fill things in black but it's not obvious what it is that I'm looking at, then you're kind of making it harder for the viewer to understand what it is that you've created. So, making sure that items in your illustration clearly read is equally important. And I'm going to spread these lines out as we get further away because it's going to get a little bit lighter. This just takes some practice. That's why I'm just showing you another example here, because it's good to see it, I think. But the biggest point that I want to make is that those black fills really just do a great job of anchoring your drawing. It makes it look much more solid as opposed to just using inks for outlines. So let me know what you think about this. Kind of curious to know what your thoughts are. And let's do something else here, just for giggles. Let's see if I hide my ink layer by itself. Get these really nice negative shapes. Now, some of the parts of this guy are not easy to read because some information is being lost, but those rocks look pretty cool, right? Those rocks are easy to discern from one another, but we're losing some information on this guy. And we can always come back in and, for example, say, okay, I want this to be darker too. Maybe this side is going to be darker. If that's the effect that we're going for example, and then maybe a little bit on his shoes. Now let's see what happens. Better. Still not great, but better. Anyway, something to think about. So that's the basic idea here. Let me know if you have any questions on this. You're going to work on an inking project. You're going to use some of these techniques that I've shown you and come up with something cool. So we'll talk about that next. Thanks so much for watching. See ya.